Now, out of all of the hundreds of watch reviews that I have done to this point, there was one watch that has gotten more views than any other watch in a single watch review, and that was the Tissot Gentleman Powermatic 80. In some ways, this is not that surprising if you truly think about it, because back in 2020, this watch was so important for setting a standard for what you could get under $1,000 for an everyday Swiss watch. That said, given the launch of models across the industry and the creation of the Tissot PRX, this watch has almost started to take on more of an underdog role. And in this video, we'll take a closer look at the newest Gentleman Powermatic 80, the ice blue Glacier dial, in an effort to readdress this collection years later after its release to determine where it stacks up against it all. So chances are, if you are fairly into watches, or even a novice when it comes to watches, you may have heard of the brand Tissot. Tissot started back in 1853 and has become a staple in the world of attainable watchmaking in Switzerland. Now, over the course of the last few years, though, Tissot has really been on a roller coaster ride, starting with that Gentleman release in the year 2020. While the Gentleman arguably launched Tissot's massive swing of momentum, the PRX quickly took away most of the spotlight in 2021, and in the years to follow with its many different variations that would come thereafter. This in many ways led to the Gentleman to be overlooked by some enthusiasts, and for the rollout of new variations from the Gentleman line to be less frequent, making this one of the first notable updates from the line in quite some time. Beginning with what remains from the previous iterations, the Gentleman measures at 40 millimeters across with its central case, 48.6 millimeter lug to lug, and 11.6 millimeters thick. In my experience, especially with this brighter dial execution, the Gentleman wears ever so slightly larger than its proposed case size might indicate, maybe around a 40.5 to 41 millimeters, an element that is also influenced by the bracelet's end lengths that stretch the overall lug to lug out to just over 53 millimeters. Luckily, the larger bezel optically shifts how large the dial appears, and the end lengths curve sharply towards the wrist, meaning the perceived lug to lug ends up somewhere between the two figures when on bracelet, and will wear pretty true to size when on strap. Now, set between odd size 21 millimeter lugs, the Gentleman provides a sufficient bracelet with a general 3-link format, pin adjusted lengths, and a quick release mechanism at the lugs. Tapering to 19 millimeters, the bracelet terminates with a hidden butterfly style clasp constructed from milled components. While everything is milled stainless steel and the clasp operates with solid action, the bracelet is perhaps the most commonly called out area for gripe for people who otherwise like the Gentleman's design. 21 millimeter lugs is not the end of the world nowadays, given the variety of options you have before you. However, it is far from a universal size, and the lack of on-the-fly micro adjustment might cause some perfect sizing issues for a select few. Yet thankfully, the Gentleman does come with a pair of half links. Looking further at the details, we have a traditional round case silhouette accented by lugs that are neatly angled away from the wrist on their undersides for a comfortable fit. At 3, a 6.5 millimeter T-sign push-pull crown manages time-telling duties while working in tandem with the snap-on case back and securing this model's capable 100 meters of water resistance. On top, a proportionally wide sloping bezel slants out thanks to its mirroring polish, with polishing also coming into play along the sides of the lugs. To avoid an overly ostentatious look, the rest of the central case is offering vertical brushing that creates a suitable look for a watch intended for the everyday. Within the confines of the bezel, a sapphire crystal with anti-reflective coating along with a very slight dome presides over this watch's most eye-catching feature, a striking dial in a shade of blue we have dubbed the Glacier or ice blue. Along with the movement that we will definitely address here in a moment, the Gentleman's dial is an area where I believe it starts to separate itself from the competition. This is even more apparent when you see the watch in person, as I'm not sure this dial's best attributes come to life without a closer look. Starting with the primary surface, this newest Gentleman showcases a light blue shade with just a hint of a sunray finish. At the outskirts, positioned among the straightforward printed minute track, we have the Gentleman's indices. And I'll let the macro photography here do some of the work for me, but suffice it to say that the alternating finishing and crisp transitions between the planes on these hour markers are truly great. The Dauphine style handset is attractive as well, displaying a central facet, mirroring polishing, and a tiny sliver of luminescent material which helps in darker environments, although it is far from a standout with its glow. At 3, a faceted date window frames a straightforward execution, and dial text is limited to Tissot's word mark at 12, and the Powermatic 80 in silicium text at 6, speaking to the elevated caliber powering this watch within. Like so much of Tissot's mechanical collection in this range, the Gentleman here leaned into the Powermatic 80 caliber. Now, unless you are just getting into watches, you are likely familiar with this caliber, which is essentially an ETA 2824 base that has been modified from its standard 4 Hz operation and beat frequency to a slower 3 Hz by way of modifications to its gear train, and in turn making it possible to double the conventional base reserve of 80 hours for that power reserve. Within the Powermatic 80 collection, one aspect not everyone realizes is a thing is there are a number of different tiers of the Powermatic, with the .111 that is utilized by the PRX, then the .611, and finally the .811 that's going to be featured in this Gentleman. The 811 offers a more traditional escape wheel and anchor, along with the added benefit of a silicone balance spring that is made more apparent to the owner with a small SI sitting next to the balance wheel when you flip this one around. This will help alleviate the negative influence of magnetic fields and dramatic temperature changes, and as a result of a more free-sprung balance architecture, we have also found these Powermatic movements to typically run very well out of the box, as this example ran between -5 to -2 seconds a day when we tested it across 5 positions. While the caliber is in view thanks to the exhibition caseback, the finishing on the movement components is largely utilitarian, offset by a few hits of polishing, visible jewels, and some mild decoration on the oscillating weight. In terms of general specs and recapping here, this movement is going to be operating at 21,600 vibrations per hour, or 3 Hertz. It does feature hacking and hand winding. Hacking stop in the second hand when you pull the crown to the farthest position, and has a power reserve of 80 hours. To conclude here, let's address some of the pros and cons of this piece, and then shift into some of the final thoughts about what I think the Gentleman represents in 2023. Beginning with some of the criticism, the leading and most notable point I think is going to be the bracelet, mostly as a byproduct of what we have seen from the PRX, which I feel has set a standard for its price point. The bracelet can be stiff with the Gentleman, has 21mm lugs, and the polished center link could be off-putting for some, all while making the watch wear larger than it does on a strap by a noticeable margin. Secondly, for those that are sticklers about legibility, you might find some trouble with AR coding on the Gentleman and lume to be underwhelming too. Though on the note of reflections, this lighter dial color does a much better job in avoiding harsh shadows than darker dial colors do, like the black, for example. But now for the pros and my general stance on this piece. So quite frankly, I find that the Gentleman has become underrated given its close proximity to, say, the PRX. Not to say that the PRX is not worthy of its attention, but when you look around watchmaking, you'll see this quite often. There's this one collection and then an affiliated collection that maybe is slightly different but could have some overlap, and one just overpowers the other given its weight. Say the Tudor Black Bay as an example versus the Pelagos, as that was really the case for many years as the Black Bay quickly ascended. When you are in a position like I am, you interact with many that will ask you, what's the best watch one person can buy for a certain price? And with one of the most common price points being $1,000, the Gentleman is obviously something that crosses my mind over and over again. And among the select collection of watches in that $1,000 tier, I would say the Gentleman has to be on that short list and has carved out a nice lane for itself. Its case is rather mass appealing in its size, though maybe slightly on the larger end. It features water resistance that covers you in a variety of different scenarios. Finishing on the case and the indices is truly exceptional, and it is one of the rare instances where you're getting that .811 movement from the Powermatic family from this brand. Watch purchases are very much driven by a romantic connection, and sometimes logic can take a back seat in this process. But in the case of the Gentleman, it's a watch that can still appeal on that wavelength, as well as being a watch that can, better than most, still make some logical sense, especially as you're starting out in your journey. It doesn't appeal to a hype standard, it delivers a quality presentation at a reasonable price for an entry-level Swiss watch, and simply put, makes a phenomenal companion for pretty much taking on anything in the day-to-day. But all right, guys, that's my take looking at the new Tissot Gentleman here. I think this dial color is great to look at, and then also, it's refreshing to see the Gentleman get more attention from Tissot. I don't want to say that they neglected this collection for a while, but clearly there is more potential to the Gentleman and what it represents. It makes, like I said, logical sense for so many people that are looking for a do-it-all watch under $1,000 and just want a no-nonsense approach. What is your take on this new dial color? And if you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, hit the bell icon. Really would appreciate that. Also check out TeddyBaldassarre.com. TeddyBaldassarre.com is a full authorized dealer of 30 brands, including Tissot. We offer quick and fast fulfillment, dedicated customer support, full factory warranty for all the products that we offer, and how we're able to fund all of our productions here is through selling watches on our site. So if you want us to keep producing this great content and like what we do here, we'd really appreciate your business. We know you can purchase a watch pretty much anywhere nowadays, but it allows us to keep doing what we're doing here. And I can speak for myself, and I know for many other people that work here that we love what we do. But guys, thank you again so much for watching. Be well, and I will see you all very soon.